and welcome to South Asia Chat, a podcast series brought to you by the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. I'm your host, Nithya Subramanian, an editor at the Institute. Amid the surging COVID-19 pandemic in India, elections were held in the 4 states of West Bengal, Assam, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu, along with the Union Territory of Puducherry. Results were announced over the past few days, and the Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam emerged as the winner in Tamil Nadu, while the Bharatiya Janata Party took Puducherry. As part of our assembly election series, we have with us Dr Narayan Lakshman, Associate Editor of The Hindu, to discuss the outcomes in Tamil Nadu and Puducherry. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Nice to join you here today.
The DMK has returned to power in the Tamil Nadu Assembly after 10 years. While it did win comfortably, the party did not sweep the polls as expected. What are your thoughts on this?
So you're absolutely right to say that the DMK's victory was not what people initially had projected, which was a landslide. Instead, what you saw with the 133 seats that they bagged is that the electorate appears to have given them a fairly strong mandate to govern and a clear victory, but at the same time has almost put in a check and balance system by giving the AIADMK a sizable proportion of seats in the state assembly as well. And I think the logic, if we are searching for one, could be that on the one hand, the DMK has emerged as a strong party with strong leadership. And strong leadership is something since the passing of the titans of the Dravidian movement, which is both Jayalalitha of the AIADMK and Karunanidhi of the DMK. So the power vacuum that emerged has seen a lot of infighting, say, within the AIADMK. And at the same time, the DMK side, while the mantle of leadership passed on quite smoothly to the current leader, M K Stalin, there is a question mark that remains over whether Mr. Stalin could deliver a state assembly victory prior to this latest election. So I think the electorate in its wisdom has given Mr. Stalin a strong mandate to rule, but at the same time has left the door open for the AIADMK to remain as a strong opposition party within the state assembly. And I think the logic again is that the AIADMK, even though it lacked that strong leadership, managed to provide good governance to the state. Let's take a step back and look at what Mr. Edappadi Palaniswamy, the outgoing or former chief minister now, had provided. He actually governed in a very solid way, especially given that he emerged from the shadows of the rule of Jayalalitha, who was a fairly centralized and strong leader, who nevertheless did not allow the green shoots of leadership to flourish beneath her. Therefore, when Mr. Edappadi Palaniswamy took charge of the party and of the government, he actually faced numerous challenges from within the party and then outside of the party. So the challenges from within the party came from the previous deputy chief minister, Mr. O. Pannirselvam. But that challenge was seen off when the two of them came together and managed to hammer out a truce and govern on a stable basis henceforth. Externally, the power of the VK Sasikala clan, Jayalalitha's erstwhile friend and the Mannargudi clan's leader, was an extremely serious one. Of course, unfortunately for Ms. Sasikala, she was convicted in the disproportionate assets scam case and she had to go to prison. And therefore that threat weakened. But at the same time, her nephew, Mr. TTV Dinakaran, splintered off and he formed the AMMK party, which in turn actually posed a serious threat in terms of engineering defections or being a home to those MLAs who left the AIADMK and went outside the party. So Mr. Edappadi Palaniswamy emerged from this turmoil of the initial period of his rule to find his feet, as it were, as an able and credible chief minister governing the party. And in fact, during the most recent COVID-19 pandemic crisis as well, he proved his credentials as an able administrator, combined with the Tamil Nadu bureaucracy, which has for many years established itself as an excellent apparatus for governing, especially in the healthcare field. Mr. Palaniswamy delivered credible policies at the state level. And the state actually performed fairly well during 2020. And the numbers did not see a surge. Of course, the most recent second wave that has overtaken the country has overwhelmed Tamil Nadu as well to an extent. But even there, the state has performed well so far relative to northern states and even as far south as Karnataka. So I think what the election results tell us in terms of the DMK, AIADMK balance is that the DMK has been given the mandate to take good governance forward. And in fact, it is the AIADMK that has set the trend for good governance so far. And at the same time, the electorate, by giving the AIADMK some seats and not seeing it wiped out of the state assembly completely, as indeed has been previous trends in the state, has ensured that there will be a check and balance against Mr. Stalin and the DMK, and they will be held to account for any policies that they seek to implement going forward.
You talk about a very interesting aspect of Mr. Palaniswamy. In fact, Stalin too was not handed over responsibility easily. He did come through some sort of ranks. And this is perhaps the first elections where there is no star power. There is no Jayalalitha and there is no Karunanidhi campaigning for their respective parties. So do you think this marks the end of an era where the world of cinema and politics met in Tamil Nadu? And what are your expectations from Stalin's leadership? And what do you think are his immediate challenges?
So I think you're absolutely right to observe that star power no longer seems to have the heft that it does in elections. And there is as I said, a very interesting question that still remains open around Mr. M K Stalin's own credentials as governing. And of course, we all know that in 2019, he did deliver a strong mandate in the Lok Sabha election, completely routing the AIADMK. And garnering all but one seat in the Lok Sabha. So I think his own father comes from that star power category of leaders. He was a script writer, film writer during the early days of the Dravidian movement, and like the others who came from the star power category, including M.G. Ramachandran, a major leader. And also a major cinema star. And then Jayalalitha after him, the leader to follow in the AIADMK. All three of these leaders used the silver screen and the cinematic medium to deliver propagandistic messages about the Dravidian movement, the common Tamil man and the unique Tamil ethnicity and the identity, and juxtaposing it to North Indian politics, Brahmin-dominated politics of the North, which came from Delhi and which was seen in some sense as the political challenger to what was needed for the Tamil people. So the history of star power and its voice in the political arena was quite different in the early years of the Dravidian movement. And we're talking about the late 1960s, 1970s, and so forth. That has considerably changed since the 1990s and the early 21st century. And the reason for such change is that the Dravidian movement itself has changed. It is no longer about pitting the needs and the demands of the Dravidian people or the Tamil people in the South versus the North. It has become much more accommodative and inclusive. It is, I would say, lost a little bit of that anti-Brahmin or caste hostility edge. It has become much more about fighting for state autonomy within the context of the broader Indian cultural milieu, recognizing Tamil Nadu's place within the Indian Union, but yet demanding the state's share of resources to deliver whatever it takes in terms of good governance for the Tamil people, whether it is, flood management, the battle against the COVID-19 pandemic, subsidies to agriculture, and all of those issues. So the nature of the movement has changed. Therefore, the ability of star power or even the need for star power to deliver that message has changed. Therefore, as you correctly pointed out, you rightly have seen stars such as Kamal Hassan making a fairly strong foray, that is forming a party, having a manifesto, and actually contesting elections. yet not making the kind of splash that was hoped for. And you have even bigger stars such as Rajinikanth, obviously, who hemmed and hawed for the longest time and made promises to take that leap into politics, into the political arena in the state, and yet failing to do so at the last minute. Of course, in his case, there were health concerns. I'm talking about Rajinikanth, and that was the reason he might have pulled out. But at the same time, it led to question marks around whether he would ally with the BJP or not, whether his politics were aligned with the BJP, how that would sit, whether it would be challenging the Dravidian parties or whether there was an alliance that was possible with the AIA-DMK. All of these questions came up, but yet neither star at the end of the day made a big splash. And that is for these major historical reasons, as I said, where the Dravidian movement's very nature itself has changed. Now, this is not to say, Nitya, that in the future, there will not be an opportunity for star power to play a role. Let's face it, the Tamil people have always been sort of, open to the notion of allowing the cinematic medium to influence them. They're quite a sentimental people as so far as voting in election is concerned, and they take cinema very seriously. So if there is in the future a star who could deliver political messages through through the means of the silver screen, there is no bar that against them. There is no saying that they would not make the kind of splash that the heroes and heroines of the past did.
And what do you think of, what are your expectations of Stalin's leadership and his challenges right now?
So Stalin is in actually an interesting position because, the DMK as such carried out a high voltage Dravidian values campaign. And a part of that was juxtaposing the ideology or the political philosophies of the DMK as a Dravidian movement forerunner to the BJP and its Hindutva politics. And that juxtaposition, or that the challenges that the DMK posed to the BJP's worldview continues to have an echo and will have an echo while Mr. Stalin now occupies the official seat of power. So the challenge for him will be, on the one hand, to continue speaking publicly about his party's commitment to those Dravidian party values, which is, for example, even against Hindi imposition, but at the same time, finding his place within the center state framework, the federal structure of India, which certainly is reliant upon formal resource allocation mechanisms. So allocation of tax revenue collections from the center to the state, coordinating policies on the concurrent list or on the state list, which require central assistance as well. And even the COVID-19 pandemic battle is a very good example of where there has to be calibration of between the state policies and the central government policies. So Mr. Stalin's challenge is to find that balance, walk that tightrope between, on the one hand, speaking out vociferously for Dravidian party values, which brought him into power, but at the same time, playing ball with the center, maybe even seeking to build that personal chemistry with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, which the AIA-DMK actually did in an extremely adept manner. So in that sense, it is a new ground for Mr. Stalin. I think Mr. Stalin also has to balance out his own victory in terms of the number of seats his party garnered with the arithmetic of alliance politics. So there are other parties which allied with him, but at the same time, you cannot allow them to have a sense of feeling disenfranchised and feeling that the DMK is calling all the shots. So I think he will have to carefully retain his political attention on the parties, various parties that have helped him come into power, and ensure that they do not feel marginalized.
You also mentioned about the AIA-DMK's alliance with the BJP, and the BJP has opened its account this time with 4 seats. Now, how do you think the entry of the BJP will affect the politics of the state, especially with regard to minorities?
So that, if you ask me, Nadia, is one of the major shifts that has happened in the last few years in terms of the politics of the state. We spoke earlier about how the power vacuum that emerged after the passing of Jayalalitha and Karunanidhi affected leadership and it affected ideology, but it also has opened up a space for a different brand of politics, saffron politics even, to enter the state. And like you said, the BJP opened its account. It has entered the state assembly after 20 years, and that is a really big step. At the same time, I think the credit must go not only to the BJP, but also its allies such as the RSS, which ground reports tell us have been working diligently at the grassroots level across the states, engaging with temples and temple festivals at the village level, mobilizing people around the politics of Hindu nationalism in that sense. So I think there is the very deliberate opening up of a political space that has happened. And at the same time, the demographics of Tamil Nadu itself has changed. The youth are far more vociferous, and let's face it, they have entered, the millennials and post-millennials have entered politics in the digital era, where campaigning through social media and the propagation of Hindutva values through social media has played a far greater role on their collective psyches and their voting behavior than in the past. In the past, the Dravidian parties, the DMK and ADMK, were effective mobilizers down to the village level through their on-ground party machines, offline. But now the online sphere has made an enormous impact. And so I think this time that has made a big impact. And I think the BJP is very deliberately playing a long strategy. They are not rushing into power. They're not seeking to do maybe what even worked in other states where legislators could be picked off from ruling parties and governments could even collapse. They are not doing that. They are not putting pressure on the AIADMK beyond a point, except for alliance politics. They are playing the long game where through alliance politics, they are seeking to slowly build up their numbers, at the same time, increase their cultural footprint on the state. And that is the politics that could yield benefits in the very long term, because you're seeking to mold the very collective psyche and voting behavior of the people. I think you're seeing the beginnings of that. I think the really interesting challenge will come from leadership of the DMK, where the DMK itself will continue to shift the needle on what Dravidian politics is. They themselves have faced uncomfortable questions about, say, Mr. Stalin's family going to temples to worship. And, are they anti-religiosity, or do they have a soft Hindutva acceptance that is building within their own party? So these kind of questions will continue to rise in the future. And whichever Dravidian party is in power will have to find a sort of meeting ground if they want to keep the political middle and remain relevant to the median voter.
We'll also have to talk a little bit about the Congress party, which picked up 18 seats out of the 25 that was allotted by the DMK. This is perhaps its best performance amongst all the 4 states that participated in the assembly elections this time. To what can this success be attributed? And do you think the Congress will be able to replicate this in other states and rebuild its position?
I think this is a really interesting, fascinating question from the point of view of the Congress being a national party. And in many, many constituencies in Tamil Nadu, there being a direct contest between the Congress and the BJP. So I think, for example, it was actually in South Coimbatore, there was a direct contest. And in fact, Kamal Hassan was also in the fray, but yet it was the BJP, Vanati Srinivasan, who prevailed. Mm-hmm. So I think there are 2 things that set apart the Congress in this election and previous elections. The first is that the Congress is less of an unknown entity in Tamil politics than the BJP. Let's take a step back to 1967, where it was actually the Congress in power and the DMK unseated the Congress after a grassroots campaign. And that was the very formal beginning of the Dravidian movement itself. At that time, the Congress was seen as a party of the elites, and it certainly was considered the party of Brahmin dominance followed from the end of the colonial period. But at the same time, the Congress has been seen as an entity that could provide a bridge between state politics and national politics. And it has always, even before this election, in the previous assembly, it has always retained a single-digit number of seats at least. The second is that the Congress, for whatever criticisms may be leveled at it, at least explicitly speaks of a commitment to secular politics and constitutional politics. And that has an overlap with the rationalist view of the Dravidian movement values, whether you were talking about the DMK or the AIADMK of the past. So from the time of Periyar, E.V. Ramsamy, and C.N. Annadurai, and then Karunanidhi and so forth, the Dravidian movement has also always been about rationalism. It balanced itself against the caste Hindu politics, and even the emancipation of women and women's rights. It spoke of all of those things as a bundle of values. And I think in that regard, the Congress was seen as neither a foe nor an ally, because while they did represent North Indian politics and Brahmin dominance, they did speak consistently from the start about constitutional and secular politics. We can always ask whether they truly adhered to, in substance, what they spoke of in terms of secular politics. And indeed, that has been the criticism of even the BJP of the Congress. But in that regard, they were not as seen as a hostile or even an unknown entity relative to the BJP. And that explains their historical standing and performance in many successive Tamil Nadu state assembly elections. I think that explains their success to a great extent. I think the second factor is that as a pushback to the BJP at a national level, a number of voters must have also voted for the Congress in the constituencies where they've historically been strong. Here again, worth taking a step back to see that from the 2014 to the 2019 Lok Sabha election, the BJP has expanded its national footprint. It has been very steadfastly trying to make inroads into the southern states of Tamil Nadu and Kerala, and of course, West Bengal in a high voltage campaign, as we know. And in that regard, there is something about the national consciousness of the Tamil voter. And I do believe that those who voted for the Congress in this election see their vote as being a counterbalance to the expanding footprint of the BJP at the national level. So both in terms of state politics and the history of state politics, as well as what is happening at the national scenario, whatever victory there is of the Congress in this election can be explained by trends in those two spheres.
And finally, let's talk a little bit about Puducherry, where the BJP won, giving it another opening in South India. Karnataka, of course, it is in power there, but we know what happened in that state. So how significant is this win, and would this give it any political leverage in southern India?
Absolutely, Nithya, it would. And the reason is symbolic more than anything. Like I think your question also suggests, may not have a powerful or reach in terms of magnitude of policy impact. Puducherry is a union territory. It's a smaller territory. But as a symbol of having breached the southern barrier for the BJP, something it had not done so far, it is extremely important. Like you said, as Karnataka is a state as far south as the BJP had got, and in terms of having a fairly significant impact. But Kerala and Tamil Nadu have proved completely intractable to saffron politics. So this is almost a second level victory that the BJP could claim. It could claim that its footprint has finally made its way to the south, even if it's in the union territory. I think the broader lead on or the knock-on effect that the BJP would be hoping to speak about in this regard is, from Puducherry, can it seek to expand more into Tamil Nadu itself? And in that regard, having control of Puducherry would allow a base for its own party activities. It would allow the marshalling of resources, coordinating with the RSS, for example, even leaning on the offices of the governor to informally help wherever possible. So, for example, we did see the case of Kiran Bedi as the governor appointed by the center in Puducherry in the past, who actually literally redefined what a governor could do within constitutional politics. Her critics, of course, described the policy actions of the governor's office as a parallel government. Now, whether or not that was true remains a question mark, but she certainly was on the front foot in terms of assessing the policies of the erstwhile government and challenging them in many regards when they were seen to be falling short. Now, these sorts of power shifts in the power balance become even more feasible when you have a BJP friendly or a BJP government itself in Pondicherry. And I think that is actually going to be a leveraging point that can be used to slowly, as we said, expand their footprint in the southern states, especially in Tamil Nadu itself.
Thank you, Dr. Narayan, for this insightful conversation. It was lovely having you with us.
Thank you, Nithya, for having me. And I look forward to speaking to you again on similar issues going forward.
You were listening to South Asia Chat, where we have been covering the assembly elections with separate podcasts on Kerala, West Bengal, and Tamil Nadu. To learn more about our work, visit us at isas.nus.edu.sg. Also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn.